Now, we are moving into James chapter 3, verse 2. Reading from the King James Version. Quote, "For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body." Unquote. Let's take a look at this in the English Standard Version. Quote, "For we all stumble in many ways. And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body." Unquote. Reading this from the Geneva Bible, which of course was written before the King James Bible. Quote, "For in many things we sin all. If any man sin not in word, he is a perfect man, and able to bridle all the body." Unquote. Reading this from the Complete Jewish Bible. Quote, "For we all stumble in many ways. If someone does not stumble in what he says, he is a mature man who can bridle his whole body." Unquote. And lastly, let's read it out of the Young's Literal Translation. Quote, "For we all make many stumbles. If any one in word doth not stumble, this one is a perfect man, able to bridle also the whole body." Unquote. Okay, now let's look at the original language in the Greek and parse out this verse. "For in many things." The phrase "in many things" is used in the Greek only 2 times in the Bible. Here by James first, and then later Paul used it in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 22. Reading from the King James Bible, quote, "And we have sent with them our brother, whom we have oftentimes proved diligent in many things, but now much more diligent upon the great confidency which I have in you." Continuing, "We offend." This is the only time that the Greek word is used in the King James Bible. Let's go ahead and parse out what this is written as. It's written in the present tense, which represents a simple statement of fact or reality, viewed as occurring in actual time. It's in the active voice, so the subject is the doer or the performer, and it's an indicative mood, which is basically stating a simple fact. So let's look at the definition of offend. To define it means to stumble in, sin against. To outline it, to stumble, to err, to make a mistake, to sin, to fall into misery, become wretched. End of the definition. Continuing, "We offend all. If any man offend." Now, offend is written in the present tense, so a simple statement of fact or reality occurring in actual time. It's an active voice, so the subject is the doer, the performer of the action. Indicative mood, so stating a simple fact. If the action really occurs or has occurred or will occur, it is rendered in the indicative mood. Continuing, "If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect." The word is a perfect. Teleos, which is the Greek, is only used 1 time in the King James Bible. Continuing, "is a perfect man and able also to bridle." Let's look at the parsing of this. It's written in the aorist tense, which is characterized by its emphasis on punctual action. That is, the concept of the verb is considered without regard to past, present, or future time. It's written in the active voice, represent the subject as the doer or the performer, and it is in the infinitive mood. In most cases corresponds to the English infinitive, which is basically the verb with to, to, prefixed to the whole. Continuing, "to bridle the whole body. That's the end of the parsing of the Greek. Now let's look at John Gill's commentary on James chapter 3, verse 2. Quote, "For in many things we offend all," unquote, or we all offend. Slip and fall, no man lives without sin. In many, in most, if not in all things, a good man himself does, he sins. And this extends to the most solemn services, the best works of a good man. There is sin in his holy things, imperfections in all his performances. His righteousness are as filthy rags. Hence no man can be justified by his works before God, nor is any man perfect in this life, so as to be without sin in himself. The apostle includes himself in this account, and that not out of modesty merely, or in a complacent way, but as a matter of fact, and what he found in himself and observed in the conduct of his life. And now this is given as a reason why persons should not be anxious of teaching others, since in many instances, in common speech and conversation, men are apt to offend, and much more in a work which requires a multitude of words, or why men should be careful how they charge, censure, and reprove others in a rash, furious, and unchristian manner, since they themselves are in the body, and may be tempted, and are attended with many infirmities, slips, and falls in common life. Quote, "If any man offend not in word," unquote, from slips and falls in general. The apostle proceeds in the slips of the tongue into the use and abuse of that member, and his sense is that if a man has so much guard upon himself, and such a command over his tongue, and so much wisdom to use it, as to give no offense by it to his fellow creatures and fellow Christians, quote, "the same is a perfect man," unquote. Not that he is perfect in himself and without sin, that is denied before, unless this is considered as a mere hypothesis, and by the way of concessions, that could there be found out a man that never, for instance, offends in word in any one part of life, that man may be allowed and be set down to be a perfect man, but no such man is to be found, and therefore none perfect. But rather the sense is that he who is common is so careful of his speech as not to offend his brethren, may be looked upon as a sincere and truly religious man. See James chapter 1, verse 26. Quote, "If any man among you seems to be religious, and brideth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain," unquote. Continuing, "Or he may be accounted as a wise and prudent man, such as the one in James 3, verse 13. Quote, "Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom," unquote. Continuing, "He is not a babe in understanding, a child in conduct, but a grown man at full age, a perfect man," in which sense the word is used in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 6. Paul wrote, quote, "Howbeit we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor of the princes of this world, that come to naught," unquote. Continuing, quote, "and able also to bridle the whole body," unquote. Either to govern the whole body, the church, to teach a society of Christians, and to feed them with knowledge and with understanding, or rather, as he appears to be able to bridle that member of the body, the tongue, so likewise to be able, through the grace of God, to keep under the whole body, that sin shall not reign in it, or the lust of it be in common obeyed. This ends the commentary of James chapter 3, verse 2 by John Gill. Thank you for studying the scriptures with me. May God richly bless you in your endeavors.